This is the Sportsline Podcast on CHCH for Wednesday, March 13th. I'm Bubba O'Neil. As you know, our focus, high-level athletes, coaches, executives, officials, and broadcasters that reside or raised in Southern Ontario. Today, a hard-working TV talent that's proven that without risk, there is no reward. Originally from the province of British Columbia, this individual got his start as a writer on the regionally popular Sports Page program in Vancouver. Taking his first risk, he moved his family east and expanded his position as a producer at Sportsnet, CBC, and TSN Radio, yet that was not enough. Currently, John Horn has had a hand as a producer and broadcaster, talking tennis for the likes of ESPN, Sky Sports, the WTA, and ATP Tours. It's been a long time, John Horn. It's great to have you here on the Sportsline couch.
Bob, it's great to be here.
It's fantastic to see you. Because what people, full disclosure for many people, you and I worked together for many years at Sportsnet, and really got to know each other. And I've always admired your work and the fact, like I said, no risk, no reward. And it really did start with that move from Vancouver to go to Sportsnet. For some people, that's a big move. That's one thing when you're a single guy and you don't have family, but to make that move was a big deal.
Yeah, it was. When you move to a new province, somewhere you've been to but never lived in, you pick up your whole life and you move. At the time, I'd just been married. I had my first son was a month or so away from being born. Mm-hmm. So, it's tough when you're figuring out, okay, what am I going to do with my life and how is it going to go? And then you've got a son on the way and your wife is working and you're trying to figure it all out. And then, so took the plunge, made the move, and figured it was for the best. I was kind of at a time in my life where I'd almost done what I needed to do in Vancouver. The market was a lot smaller there. I'd had great opportunities working there, and it was just time to do something different. And an offer came up, and it was at Sportsnet, and they were very accommodating and helpful, making the move and the transition quite easy. And sure enough, I came, and now I've been here 17 years. So wow. It's been a good journey, and I've done a lot of things over the years, and but that was the stepping stone back in 2007, I guess we're looking at. And but I'm glad I did it, because I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't made that move.
Sports Pages, for many people that don't know, Sportsline was a big program. Yeah. Prior to this Sportsline on Global, a big story. Taddy Hebscher, many people know about how beautiful that show was. One of the first real sports shows, well before TSN or Sportsnet. Sports Pages was really similar, but also carried sports with like that friendly, fun kind of charm with some really. I think of a guy like Don Taylor, who I think is one of the best sports broadcasters in the nation, that a lot of people don't know about, especially in this side of the country.
Going into the BC Hall of Fame, actually, coming up this summer for all his work in broadcast. Yeah, look, I was lucky enough to get my start there. There's been a lot of people who've gone through there over the years, behind the scenes and on camera. Some names you may know, Dave Randorf, who's obviously done a lot here, is now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. John Shorthouse, who's been the play-by-play guy for the Canucks for a number of years.
I think one of the best in the country.
He's outstanding. Dan Murphy, who's on that broadcast as well, was a behind-the-scenes guy. Barry McDonald, who was the guy who brought me in. Don Taylor, of course. So there's been a lot of people throughout the years who've gone through Sports Page, and one of the big heads of Sports Page, Paul Carson, who passed away. Unfortunately, he was sort of the spearhead of the show and brought in all those talents to the show. And I was just lucky that I got an opportunity. I was writing at the time for a local newspaper. A spot came up. I applied, and I was shocked that I got a call. I was on a golf course, and Barry's like, "Yeah, we want you to come and try out and see how you are." And I was like, "Great." So I started off as a writer and worked on the show, 4 days a week, and then I moved to producer part-time, filled in, and then I got to do some on-air stuff too, and that's when I started doing reporting and things. So really, that was my starting point, and those guys were great. The atmosphere was outstanding. It was so fun to work on that show. It almost didn't feel like work when you were there. We just had so much fun, and the memories still to this day stick out. And it was great, because it was really at the time when national sports television was becoming a really big thing. Sportsnet has just launched pretty much around that time. Yeah. That would have been around 1999, somewhere around there. And then TSN was starting to become a bigger thing as well in terms of their shows. And we were still like that small half-hour local sports show. And you know what it's like being in Hamilton and having a local show. It's important to the people in the city to have that show. And we always prided ourselves on, obviously, the Canucks and the BC Lions were a big deal. But, the Vancouver Canadians, they were a AAA team at the time. That was a big deal. There was still soccer, high school sports, university, SFU, UBC, football, basketball. And we saw a lot of talents come out of BC. Steve Nash, we followed him during his high school career.
Wow.
Playing basketball. So, there are a lot of baseball players, too, who started. Jeff Francis at the time, Adam Lowen, guys who, became major league players and good players, too. We got to see them right from the beginning. So, but as all good things come to an end at some point, 2005 is when we had moved to a new sort of station. We were actually a show that was out of Burnaby, BC. Our show was being aired in Victoria. We actually had our master control in Calgary, and we got paid in Winnipeg. So from Winnipeg. So that was kind of the end at that point, where the local sports wasn't such a big deal anymore. It still was, but people just weren't following it as much. And then the way that Sportsnet TSN came along, that kind of was the writing on the wall, so to speak. So then I worked on the radio station, the all sports radio station there, the Team 1040, which became TSN Radio. Did that for a couple of years, and was hosting shows and doing updates and that kind of thing. And then the Sportsnet gig came along, and it was just the timing was right. So that was the time to make the move, and I did.
And I know you talk about these days at sports pages. Was this something that kind of fell on your lap, or did you just always know you're going to be in sports?
I wasn't smart enough to go to university, so no, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I just was never a big work, studying on tests kind of guy. I was always a project guy. I loved doing projects, and working on and studying for tests was just not my cup of tea. I always liked sports from the time I was a kid. I cut out newspaper clippings. I was hockey stuff all over my wall. I was one of those guys, one of those kids who had the transistor radio under his bed pillow, listening to Canuck games late at night because I was supposed to be in bed. I don't know if my mom knows that story or not, but that was sort of how I was zoned in on sports for so long. I played tennis competitively, played soccer, played baseball, did all the sports stuff as a kid. And I just think that, it was kind of something that would be something that I would do that would fit my personality. And my mom was always big on, hey, have you ever looked into broadcasting? It might be something, you'd be interested in. And so I went the broadcast route. I did a part-time thing in the evenings, and that got me into a full program at BCIT in Burnaby, BC. Great broadcasting program there. I've had a lot of people go through that. A lot of on-air news and sports people and weather people have gone through that system before I was there and since I've been there, and did that. And that was kind of the starting point to getting into it. And did what most people do, or at least used to do at the time, was take the road trips up to the interior of BC, to the island, looking for jobs, looking for anything that you could get into the business, and managed to fall into a writing gig, and worked at a bar part-time as well. And
so we all did.
That's what everybody did. A little different now maybe, but certainly at the time that's what we did. And and I really just got a great opportunity. And luckily I think I showed myself in the first couple of weeks that my personality was a fit, and that was it. It was always a big thing. It wasn't so much about how great you were in terms of your writing and how great you were. It was all about, what's your personality like? Are you going to fit in with the guys? Are you going to fit in with the group? And I think I did that, and I handled jokes well, and I think that was kind of the reason why I actually started there, because they could make fun of me and I could make fun of them, and it made no difference, and we could play jokes on each other, and we had some, just I think back of it now, we just had some great times. It was such a good time. Probably I've had a lot of great times over the years, but that start was unbelievable and really got me off on the right foot.
And I think about our days at Sportsnet. You leave Vancouver, you make that risk, you come out to Toronto, and you and I meet each other at Sportsnet. And, I try to tell people too, very much like you, not that I'm not having a great time here at CHCH or whatever, but there was something about that newsroom at Sportsnet. I think because we were maybe all in that same age group, you had a guy like a leader of like Scott Moore that was determined for us to be not number two. We wanted to be, it was this uphill battle to battle TSN. TSN was sort of 15 years ahead of us, so it was a long road to travel. So everything was, we wanted to be the best.
For sure.
And it set a tone, and I think about where we are right now. Each one of us, and only not just the two of us, there are so many of us, girls, guys, producers, broadcasters, that have gone on to bigger things. And I think it was all said in that newsroom.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, it was definitely when I made the move, I had no idea what to expect. I remember I started working at Sportsline on a Thanksgiving holiday. I couldn't even get into the building because I didn't have a pass. So it was, I had to call the guy who was running the show and get in. And then I called the manager. I'm like, how do I get in here? And he's like, oh, I didn't realize you were starting today. So I walked in, and that was kind of like my start. But yeah, I mean, we had a good group of people, and it was funny because we worked with some people closely. There were other people we didn't work with closely, but we saw them in passing, whether it was editors or guys on the row or what have you. But I think pretty early on, I found my way. I was working late on the Pacific show at the time that Don Taylor was hosting, and so I was working late night, so I wasn't in there during the hustle and bustle of the 6 o'clock or the 10 o'clock. I was there, but I wasn't involved in it. And so you got a good opportunity to see how everything worked, and then you would slowly start to integrate with the other producers and the other associate producers and get to meet everybody. And in general, like there was a lot of good people there. There's a lot of talented people there, and as you mentioned, we've seen a lot of people move on from there over the years. And you got guys who are directing commercials, you got guys who are producing documentaries and features, and guys who are still at the company now. Some are working with CBC, Hockey Night in Canada. There's a lot of talent there. Some have gone to TSN.
It's amazing.
So I mean, there's a really good group of people who've started there. I mean, I always look at the industry now. It's just it's so different now, and it's hard to say for sure how stations work now compared to how they were back then. I say back then, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But it's certainly it's good to see all the people who are still in the business, who are doing well for themselves. They have to start it at somewhere. Just like me, I came from somewhere, and they came from somewhere, and some people were lucky enough to start at Sportsnet day one, and some of them are still there. So certainly, as you said, Scott Moore and a lot of the management there, found talent and new talent, and as talent is, it's like when a player goes to a team and they start, you got to try and keep them there, and that's always the hardest part because usually there's something else on the horizon for them.
If you're good, there is going to be something for you.
Yeah, for sure. So it was good times there. I enjoyed it, and I think I was there for about 5 years, and then again, then the next move happened. So
and that's where I want to go, because I left in 2010 for here on a full-time basis, and getting to do Sportsline with Mark Hebscher, and being in the CHCH environment, and I had been doing some weekends and really and this is home for me too. So it was nice for me to come home and work in the area that I've grown up in, that I know the best. The timing was perfect for me to leave. You made a different decision, though. You were there a little bit longer than I was. And then you make this decision that, I'll tell you this straight up, and then we've discussed this before, I wouldn't have done. And that is going freelance, because to me, I like security. I like to know where I am, what I'm doing, where I'm going, what's my paycheck, whatever. You make that real difficult decision to go freelance, but this is the crowning glory for you.
It was definitely so I went over to TSN. One of the guys who ran the TSN radio in Vancouver had been asked to help put together TSN in Toronto, which is TSN 1050 now, and he was in charge of branding TSN across Canada. So I think they had a station going in Edmonton. I can't remember if they were all at the same time or not, but Edmonton came along, Montreal, Ottawa, all the other TSNs. There was TSN Radio here in Hamilton too, of course, which he helped launch originally, and I did some stuff with as well. So he called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come over and help out with the radio station? We're just getting going." The producer of the midday show, which was Leafs Lunch at the time, was going off of maternity leave. Can you come in and help us sort of with the show and get things going? And I said, yeah, sure. That sounds like a great opportunity. Yeah, let's do it. So I went over there and Rob Gray, who was in charge there, said, we need to do some things. We want you to help out and help produce the show and work on some other things on the other shows to help out. And I said, yeah, absolutely. That sounds like fun. So I did that for about a year and a half, and then the maternity leave was over. It was just after the 2014 Sochi games, I suppose, which I worked on as well. And at that point, it was, so what am I going to do now? Am I going to stay at TSN? Or am I going to do other things? And somebody brought it to my attention at the time. It's like, well, do you want to go freelance? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm kind of freelancing right now because I'm working at the station, but I'm not full time. I'm not an employee, so to speak, but I'm working there. And they're like, oh yeah, freelance is the best. You have lots of opportunities and you can pick your hours and you can do what you want and you don't have to work just for TSN. You can work elsewhere because you're behind the scenes. And I thought, oh, maybe that's not a bad idea. So it all kind of came full circle at that point. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. Then radio asked me to contribute to a few other things. Then TV said, oh, you do TV. We need some freelance help on TV, working behind the scenes on the hockey broadcasts. And then they got the tennis going, so I got involved in that. And next thing you know, I'm sort of working at TSN, 35 hours a week, but I'm still freelancing. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of taking care of myself and picking and choosing what I can do, but I'm freelancing at the same time. Now, as you said about a freelancer, it's tough because, as you said, you like to know when you're going to be there, what your hours are, when you're getting paid, etc. In freelance, you need to be a yes guy. You need to be a guy who needs to say, can you do the shift? Yes. Can you go here? Yes. Can you do this? Yes. We have to have you for 12 hours. Can you do it? Yes. You got to be yes, yes, yes. Because if you get the reputation of being a guy who's not so much a yes guy, and I'm going away for the weekend, or I've got this stag to go to, or whatever.
They're not calling
you back. So you really, at the beginning, for anybody who's a freelancer out there, you got to say yes at the beginning, especially because that's super important. And so I was just being a yes guy. And then the next thing you know, I was like, well, maybe I could start doing some other things. And then I got an opportunity to work on the Pan Am Games, and then I started working and doing some tennis stuff, and it all sort of followed suit from that point. So. But as a freelance guy, and which I currently am now, it's, you don't just sit back and let the phone ring. You have to be very diligent about making calls and keeping up with people and that sort of thing. So, going back to what you said at the beginning, freelancing is not for everybody because some people, like you said, want to know when they're working, how much they're getting paid, when they're getting paid, which is totally fine. But you have to really have the confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to do it and that you're going to be able to handle it and also know how to handle it properly. You got to be proactive instead of just sitting back. So that's not always for some people. It's like sales jobs, I guess, right? Like I guess if you're a realtor, you can't just sit there and hope that people are going to sell you their house or want you to sell their house. You've got to actually go out and hustle and call people and grind, right? And that's kind of what you have to do, really.
So now because of this, and these are the opportunities that start to come to you. You're all of a sudden working for ESPN. Mm-hmm. You're working for TSN. You're still doing some stuff with the consortium for the Olympics, which was the joining of TSN, CTV, and Sportsnet. You're doing stuff for Sky Sports, and this is where the tennis thing for you really starts to ramp up.
Yeah, I mean, the tennis things really started when I was at TSN. They got the Grand Slam coverage, and they decided that they were going to expand their Grand Slam coverage. They were going to do studio shows around the Grand Slam. So it started off, I believe it may have just started off with Wimbledon, but I remember when TSN, I can't remember what year this was, but I remember when TSN expanded to their 5 channels. The very first sporting event that went on when they had the 5 channels was tennis. I believe it was the U.S. Open. And that was the first time that, we could go on TSN and have different matches on different channels. Right. And that was like a big deal, not only because of the 5-channel launch, but because of the fact that tennis was the first thing that we were showing. And so it was great that we were able to, show tennis, one match on TSN 1, another on TSN 3, and then another on TSN 5, and then keep 2 and 4 with, Sports Center or whatever other local programming there was at that time, or if there was another game of some sort. So that was really the first time that TSN had kind of done what Sportsnet was already doing, which was, they already had the 4 or 5 channels, and now TSN was able to do the same thing. And so that was really the takeoff for me, was that I was working behind the scenes. I was like a stats guy and a scoreboard guy and updating everybody of what's going on the screens. But also because I had really good tennis knowledge, I was also helping out, with the producers and that sort of thing. And then at that point, it was like, well, I really like doing tennis. I've always been good at tennis. I've got a background in tennis. I played tennis. Maybe I should be doing more tennis. And then I started, thinking, well, why can't I do matches on the ATP World Feed or the WTA World Feed, or why maybe they need some people in England to do some things. And so then I just started getting curious about it and started making some calls and inquiries, as you kind of do. And then that spun off into a bunch of different things. So that's how I really got all my opportunities, was just making the initial calls. And, if you do a good job and you're reliable and people like you, then you're going to get other jobs. It's just kind of how it goes. Or, hey, we need somebody to cover this event, or we need somebody to be at this Grand Slam. And that's kind of how it's all spun off. It's just, the English tennis scene, for those who don't know, the bulk of the tennis is done in England, the broadcast. So the men's feed, the women's feed, a lot of the Grand Slam coverage, Wimbledon obviously, is done from England.
Like, as in you're calling the matches from
calling the matches from England. That wasn't always the case. COVID kind of changed that a little bit, but there was a lot of that still going on in England. Sky Sports is in England. Amazon Prime, when they were doing tennis up until last year, that was all done in England. It's just all based there. So really, and since COVID, the only on-site stuff that is being covered are the Grand Slams and the end-of-year tournaments. There's the odd tournament here and there, but most of it is being done from there. So everybody in England really knows each other, and the producers all know, and the executive producers know, and the commentators all know each other. And so when names come up, it's like, hey, who are you going to get? Who do you want? If you do a good job and you're reliable and they like you, you have a pretty good chance of doing it. And so I've just been lucky, because I'm kind of one of the few North American voices that you hear on these feeds, because a lot of it is done from England. So they use people who are in England who can drive home after they're done their shift, as opposed to going to a hotel like I have to do. But it's worked out really well, and that really all started from TSN. So Sam Cicerello, who is one of the producers there, does hockey, sort of got me in there, and that was kind of the start. And so I thank him for making the initial sort of plunge, and I've kind of just taken it from there.
Well, that's the best part of it, is like, and especially when after a couple of years of being in our business, when you have an opportunity to center that love of whatever you want to do to the sport that you really like the most, that is certainly, I think, a big advantage, I think, for you, the station, everyone you're working for. Let's just put the tennis thing on a pause for just a quick moment. I want to go back to one of your ESPN sort of gigs that you were doing.
Yeah.
And, I think about this right now, May 19th, 2018. Do you know where you were?
Well, I'm going to guess that was probably some sort of basketball playoffs, I'm going to guess.
Incorrect.
No.
Incorrect.
Okay,
you were working for ESPN as a producer at McMaster University when Johnny Manziel signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yes.
And you're working for ESPN, and of course, the name Johnny Manziel is a big deal. Yeah. Not only is it a big shock that look at him. I still can't believe that Johnny Manziel signed with the Tiger Cats. Yeah. It still blows my mind, right? But this is big. This is a big story in the United States. What was it like covering that story?
It was a huge story. It's fun to look at those pictures again and see that the guy who was actually doing the story there for ESPN, I said he was a body double to Milos Raonic, by the way. He looked exactly like him. I used to call him Milos. It was funny. His name was Mike. I mean, look, that's kind of, it was a huge deal. I mean, it was a big deal. When he came to the Ticats, they sent me and a reporter, camera, sound guy, to practice. We're in the locker room talking to him. It was a big deal, right? And when ESPN comes to Canada, it's usually a big deal, right? Because there must be some connection to something, and ESPN doesn't come to Canada all that often. So when they do, it's got to be a big story. And Johnny Manziel had obviously gone through a lot of turmoil and so forth. So for him to actually come to Hamilton and be part of the Ticats. We really spent a lot of time on. So part of the producer role is that you coordinate the live hits that go into SportsCenter. So we had a show at 2:00 in the afternoon, we had one at 6, there was one at 7, there was one at 10, there's one overnight, which we tape obviously. But they wanted stuff on Manziel on all the shows. So we were busy. Like, we were not just there having a laugh, and they wanted a one-on-one with him. They wanted the guy who was doing Mike, who was doing the story. They wanted him on camera like 3-4 times. I think there was one show we did it twice in an hour.
There's an individual NFL show at that time. I
can't remember if NFL Live was going at that point or not. I don't know. I couldn't even remember we were there, so I can't remember how many shows we had. But it was a big deal, and Manziel was good with us. We had a one-on-one chat with him, and we talked about golf, and we talked about a bunch of different things, and it was fun. Like, it was fun. Like, it was nice to be doing something in your home province that was actually, making some headlines in the States, and it was easy for me. I could just drive there as opposed to flying, which is half the time what we end up doing, flying to the location for ESPN stuff. So it was nice to be able to do that. And then, of course, the Ticat experience was kind of short-lived, and next thing you know, we're in Montreal doing stuff on Johnny Manziel, so with a different reporter and more stuff, and it was, that was crazy too. So I think we did 2 games in Montreal, and I think in the first game he barely played, and I want to say in the second game he may have played the full game, but he wasn't very good. I can't remember. But then I think he got released shortly after, or he got hurt or something.
No, after he played the Ticats and threw 4 interceptions in the first quarter.
That was it. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that was funny. I'm glad you remember this, because that was good. We had a good time covering him. I remember I was on Montreal radio. We were talking about him, and Montreal made a big deal about it as well, of course. And but ESPN.
How could you not? It was Johnny Football.
Johnny Football. I mean, and I mean, the turmoil and everything, and everyone thought for sure he was going to mess up and it was going to be a disaster. And I don't know if it was a disaster, but it obviously didn't turn out well. I mean, he didn't play much, and ended up 2 teams, and then he was gone, and that was the end of him for the most part. Played a few. What did he played some? What was the other? Was he playing in the XFL, or he played in something?
I think it was the U Spring League or something.
He played a little bit more.
Yeah.
I was actually disappointed in the Netflix doc that came out on him, because it never really touched on his CFL time at all. It's
so true. A lot of people were upset about that.
I know, and I was waiting for like just a little bit at the end, and the only thing I could think of is that maybe if they did incorporate that part, it was going to be too much to include as part of the documentary, because it was basically on his college career and what a mess he was leading up to. And then if they got to the end, it kind of finished well. I thought it was a good finish point, but if they brought in the CFL stuff, you probably would have needed another 20 minutes worth and I don't know where the finish would have been at that point. So, but yeah, I mean, those Manziel days were, that's funny. That's 6 years ago now, or almost 6 years ago. So it's crazy how time flies. Can you even remember it?
It really is. I just remember what a story it was. And, and as someone that, not so much now, but especially in those days, going to Ticat practice, and there's kind of the same 4, 5, 6 guys, Louis B, one of being one. Like, we're kind of all the same guys there all the time. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it's like, CBS, it's like we're thinking to ourselves, like, these stations could have easily tapped off a TSN feed and gotten a TSN reporter to front a lot of this stuff. Yeah. But they, as you said, if ESPN's coming to Canada, it's a big deal. Yeah. And like these rooms, these what we would call media rooms, folks, I mean, 50, 60 people, game day, 100 people in the room, like something like it was a playoff game that we had never seen. And we're so used to getting to ask the questions first, but it's the other guys, is these big guys that are asking the questions first.
Yeah, and I always laugh at that, because it's the same with any other sport. Say in basketball, when LeBron comes to town, or when the Raptors were having their playoff run, there's the core group of people who are there. Say in the Raptors, it's Doug Smith, who's always there, and there's always somebody from TSN, always Michael Grange or whatever. The same people are always there, and they're usually the ones who sort of get in there first, and rightly so. They cover the team on a regular basis. But then suddenly, ESPN rolls in, or TNT rolls in, and it's the same with hockey. It's the same with a lot of other sports. It's suddenly there's like a different presence there that, what's going on? Why are they here? Kind of thing. And I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm also very, especially, if I'm producing, I speak to the guys and I go, look, like, don't jump in there right at the beginning. I know we're going to get our stuff in there, but a lot of the reporters who come to town, they're very cognizant of that, and they don't sort of try to take over like you might think. They know they're going to get their questions in, and most people know that when ESPN or TNT or CBS is in town, and they're always going to get a little bit of extra information to those people just because they made the effort to come up here. So I mean, it was that was a fun time with Manziel, and I've had a lot of opportunities in Ontario to do things with ESPN. We did the Raptors during the playoffs, run before they got to winning the championship. Before that, then the championship run, which actually I wasn't here for. I was away doing tennis, funnily enough, so I missed that whole run. But they were there, and they had a ton of people, all their staff, all their big shot guys, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world, the Woj. They were all of them were in town for that. So I mean, there's been great opportunities to cover Toronto sports and to cover Ontario sports for ESPN, and I just hope it continues, and maybe we'll find another former NFLer will come to town, and suddenly we'll drop into Hamilton and be part of the team. Maybe it'll be like Fields or something will get released, and then he'll suddenly sign a contract. Who knows, right?
Or Tom Brady will make another comeback and play the CFL.
Yes,
he did hint at that in one of his podcasts. Maybe I should try the CFL.
Can you imagine that? Imagine if he came to the CFL.
Oh, goodness.
Like the hype. Can you imagine?
Yeah, enough already.
Yeah, that would be a gig for me, because I guarantee you I would be assigned to that. So that would be good. So I'm hoping for it, because that would be work for me.
So so then back to tennis, you get these opportunities. You're traveling around the world. You're doing different tournaments. You're doing the biggest tournaments in the world, in the Grand Slams, the majors. And we talked about you having a family, and unfortunately, you have a family tragedy.
Yeah.
And you unfortunately lose your wife.
Yeah. You've
got 3 kids.
Yeah.
You're traveling the world. Can you talk to me a little bit what that's been like?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I don't dwell on it too much. I mean, this is really the first time I've talked about it at any length. It's not easy when your kids are younger. They're older now, which is, my oldest is 16. I got one almost 14, and my daughter who's 12. And it's tough. It's not easy to juggle so many different hats. I guess that's the hardest part, because first you have to be dad first, and then everything else is second. And so whenever I am away, whenever I am working, my dad head is always just going, because you always have to think, are the kids okay? Is everything good at school? And then you're checking your emails, and you get texts from them. Can I do this? Can I do that? What about this sport that I'm doing? What about this? I need this and I need that. So the toughest part is really just juggling everything. It's not something I ever thought that I would have to do. I mean, I've always been very involved anyway. So I guess maybe that has made the transition a little bit easier, in that, I was never a great cook, so I've had to become a good cook now, because I have to cook for not just myself, but for 3 others. And if the food's bad, they're not going to be happy. And they've got to grow, and you got to look after them. So I've learned a lot of things over the years, the last 5 years or so, where I've had to be responsible for not just myself, but for 3 other young people. And that goes from learning how to do ponytails to, helping with all the different things that you need to know for kids, whether it's riding bikes or throwing baseballs or going to gymnastics or painting nails and all that kind of stuff. Some dads are involved in that, probably not as many out there as there could be or should be, but I've picked up all that stuff, and I've had to learn it all, and it's been kind of a fun journey in that aspect. But it's difficult because, you're always in the back of your mind wondering if they're okay, and you're always wondering if going away is the right thing to do, but you also have to pay the bills, and you also have to work. And luckily I've had a really good support system around me. I've got a great nanny who's helped out. She's been a really good backbone for us, and she's great with my daughter especially. So that gives me a lot of peace of mind when I am away. And when I say I'm away, like sometimes I'm not just down the street in Detroit, like I'm in the Middle East or I'm in England or somewhere, it's good to know that I don't have to worry when I'm away.
Right.
I still worry because it's just natural instinct as a dad, but at the same time, I know they're going to get to school. I know that they're going to get fed every night. I know that they're going to go to bed when they're supposed to, get their homework done. And then I have to be the bad cop from, however many miles away and say, did you get your homework done? Why didn't you do this or what have you? So yeah, it's definitely, probably more than what a lot of people have on their plates. But at the same time, I don't really dwell on it. I just kind of go about my business and do it, because what can you do? You have to do it. And, I think part of the fact that I went freelance, just to sort of tie it up together, if I didn't go freelance, I don't think I would have been able to handle it as well, because being a freelance guy, you have to take care of things. You have to be proactive. You have to be organized. You have to be, book your own flights. You have not all the time, but often. You got to know your hotels. You got to talk to other people. You got to be in touch with what's going on. Send your invoices in. You got to be structured and organized. If you're not, you're going to be a disaster. And I think that when all of this came on me, I had to be very organized, even more so right at the beginning. And then luckily we've got into a good flow now. I don't think if I had done that freelance thing from the beginning, it would have been a lot harder. Granted, being here all the time would probably be more beneficial for them, but at the same time, they understand it and they're good with it. And I think they kind of get a kick out of it when they get up in the morning and put the TV on and there's dad on the tennis and he's not waking me up.
Right.
He's waking me up on TV instead of in person. But they've been really good. They're strong kids. They're great kids. And I'm lucky that it's gone as well as it has, because it has its challenges for sure.
I certainly appreciate you talking about that. I know that's not an easy thing for you to talk about, and but it is part of your story, I think, as well too. So I certainly appreciate you talking about that.
Yeah, I think it's the thing to do is to not shy away from it. I mean, sometimes there's awkward moments where they sort of ask, how does your mom handle it? How's their mom handle it being on their own at home? And I'm like, well, yeah, right. So it's sometimes difficult from that aspect of things, but they've turned out really well. They're really good independently. Of course, they could do more around the house, and if they're watching, they know they could do more around the house. But it's kids are kids, and they all play sports, different sports. They do different things, and they're very independent, good at school, and I couldn't ask for more. So I'm lucky from that aspect that I've got kids who are easy to deal with.
Back to tennis. I thought about a year ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, Canada's men win the Davis Cup for the first time. Most recently, the Billie Jean Cup won by Canada.
Yep.
And we have this crop of, some older players and a lot of young and up-and-comers right now.
Yep.
And some, like Felix Auger-Aliassime, that have got into the top 10. Denis Shapovalov also just kind of on that top 10 edge as well, too. There was a belief that Canadian tennis was on the explosion of something mega. It hasn't worked out this way so far for the last year. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough year or so for Canadian tennis, apart from the Billie Jean King Cup win, which was a nice win for the ladies. I'm glad that they got the recognition. It was sort of their first big recognition on the big stage. I mean, Bianca Andreescu obviously winning the U.S. Open, Annie Fernandez getting to the U.S. Open final. Obviously a big thing, and in the past we saw Jeannie Bouchard getting to a final at Wimbledon, and Milos getting to a Wimbledon final, and good career that he's had, great career he's had. But it was nice after sort of a bit of a lull last year for the women to win the Billie Jean King Cup. Now, was the competition as strong as maybe the men had, because there were some teams that had got bounced early? That's just the way the draw works, so not to take anything away from them, but they got it done, and it was great to see. And again, good for Canadian tennis, and that just gets more women playing and more girls playing, and and that's what the whole goal is to try and get more people playing the sport.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a bit of a lull. I mean, they really have struggled. The big players, Felix Auger-Aliassime has not had a good calendar year. He did win a tournament last year in Basel, a 500 event, so that's like a couple steps down from a Grand Slam. Denis Shapovalov's had a really horrible year last year, got injured as well. Both of them have really struggled to start this year. Bianca Andreescu, we haven't seen her this year. She got injured last year, hasn't played much at all.
I hate using this word, but I'll tell you, again, a lot of people outside the tennis world are beginning to wonder if the words flash in the pan. That everything worked out well that year. I mean, not only it started with the tournament that's going on right now at Indian Wells for her, and she just had a crazy year.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened with Jeannie Bouchard the year that she, did so well that one year. She won her first tournament. She went to some Slam semis, Slam final. Really, when you look at her career, you look at that particular year as the year that she did everything, and 2019 is the year that Bianca did everything, winning Indian Wells, winning the U.S. Open, winning in Toronto when Serena pulled out injured in the final. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, look, when people ask me about Canadian tennis, I always say this: is that yes, we want more, because when players are on they get to a high level, you want more. So it doesn't matter if you win a slam, then people want you to win 2 slams. If you win a tournament, you got to win the next one, and you got to win the next one. It's the same with team sports. When the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, people are already at the Super Bowl. The trophy's barely being hoisted, and they're talking about we're going to win the next one, and it's like one is just not enough for anybody. So look, I mean, it's taken time for the Canadian players to get to where they've got, like Daniel Nestor, Grant Connell, all the female and men's players back in the day who you don't think about as much because they were predominantly doubles players, and there were some great women's players too, like Helen Kelsey, Carleen Bassett-Seguso. There are a lot of women's players who paved the way as well, but tennis was never the big sport in Canada up until just recently. Even when Milos was doing his thing at the start of 2010, when Jeannie came along, it was really those two and Daniel Nestor, and that was really all. And there wasn't really that sort of push to let's have women's tennis, men's tennis, let's have girls and boys playing as much. And then suddenly it sort of took off a little bit when Shapovalov came along, beat Nadal in Montreal. Felix Auger-Aliassime comes along, he starts playing and winning. Then Bianca Andreescu wins. And then now, there's more grassroots tennis programs. Tennis Canada is doing way more. They're opening new facilities. Kids are playing in the summer. There's more courts. It's really taken off since then. So from that standpoint, it's been great. Unfortunately, the results just haven't been there. But as I was saying, the big thing when I talk about Canadian tennis is that the women's and men's fields in pro tennis right now are so good and so strong. You're not going to see, I don't think, the Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, Steffi Graf, Navratilova eras where, they were the dominant players and they were winning every tournament and they were always in the Slam finals. There are so many good players on both sides, so balanced. Now, granted, Djokovic is still great. Alcaraz is outstanding.
Joker's starting to show some cracks.
Right, showing a few cracks, yeah.
The Italian guy beat him good this week.
At Indian Wells, got a nice win over him. I think it was the first time Djokovic had lost to a lucky loser ever in a tournament, I think. But Iga Swiatek on the women's side, Sabalenka has won 2 straight Australian Opens. There's great players at the top of the game, and I think there's still those great players who are above the rest. But it's the crop of players from, say, 5 to 20 on both sides where on any given week, you could see Holger Rune in a men's final at a big tournament. You can start seeing, Jessica Pegula win a tournament. There's a good balance between lots of different players, all different styles of games, a lot of all-round players, a lot of big hitters. So it just makes it harder for the Canadian players to win consistently and to get good results. And, Denis Shapovalov, as an example, his style of game is very much it's a go for broke. It's, big serves, big shots, go for the lines, not a lot of rallies. And, that works sometimes, but it doesn't work consistently. And then when you play a player who's a good player, like a Tsitsipas or someone like that, they're just going to find little openings, and then they're just going to wait for you to make a mistake. And that's kind of what's happened to Dennis, is that he's been serving poorly, a lot of double faults, a lot of low first serve percentage.
Unforced errors.
Unforced error counts are high. And so maybe he needs to change his style of game. He's gone through several coaches too. So he doesn't seem to have really changed his game, and I think he needs to do it, maybe not to a extreme, but maybe to a lesser extent, but just stay in the points a little bit longer, a little more rallies. Don't go for everything at certain points. I mean, I was watching him play Andy Murray. I was actually at Wimbledon on the grounds watching Andy Murray play Shapovalov, which was kind of fun. But there was a tiebreak where it was 5-5, and he gets an ace, and then he goes for another big ace, and then he goes for it on his second serve, and he double faults. And it's like, that's just not a moment where in a tiebreak at 5-all, you're just going to go for a big second serve, get the ball in play, force the opponent to make a good shot.
Is his temperament off? Like, is he too emotional sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's become more emotional, certainly the last little while. We've seen a few racket tosses, a few umpire incidents and that sort of thing. I think, with losing and frustration comes, a little bit of anger and emotion. I mean, he's been in the top 10, the low top 10, top 15 for sure. Right now he's out of the top 50, and, he's
Crazy.
just not finding any rhythm. I mean, last year at Indian Wells, he was turning around, looking at his coaches and saying, I don't want to play tennis anymore. And so then he gets injured at Wimbledon. And I think he's just, he's an emotional guy, but I think it's when you're at a level that you think you can be and you've been at, you always expect to be at that level. Like we talked about winning a title, that people expect you to win again. When you're in the top 20 or in the top 10, people expect you to be there all the time. And it's just the way the competition is and how good the tennis is right now. It may not just not realistic, probably. It's tough to do that. And, I like Felix Auger-Aliassime's game more so because he's very calculated. He's very calm, for the most part, demeanor, pretty stoic out there. Big hitter from both sides, comes to the net, good serve. But again, he just makes some crazy unforced errors at times, and he'll go through lulls in matches where he looks like he's playing really well. And then, there was a couple matches where in Grand Slams where he's been up 2 sets and he loses the next 3 just by making a few mistakes at the wrong time and getting the opponent, giving him some confidence to get back into it. And it's tough as a tennis player. Look, we know if you follow tennis, it's a grind. Like, you're January to November, you're playing all over the world, different surfaces, tournament to tournament. It's tough to play tennis. And
all alone, too.
Yeah, you're alone. I mean, you got your team. Some people travel with their girlfriends. You got a little bit of look into the Netflix series with the tennis series where, Breakpoint, where you had an opportunity to sort of see how it is behind the scenes. And, as much as I think the Netflix series hasn't garnered huge attention and maybe wasn't received that well, I mean, I thought they did a decent job, but you did get an opportunity to see a little bit of the intensity behind the scenes. I know the Maria Sakkari episode's really good, the Ange Jabeur episode where, there's some tears and there's some frustration, and you really get to see behind the scenes what it's like to be a tennis player on the road with really just your coach. Some players have girlfriends with them all the time. Some players have parents who travel, or their coaches are their parents, so that helps. But it can be a lonely sport. You're an individual out there, and you're doing your own thing, and you're trying to navigate through the twists and turns of tennis matches, and not just one, usually 5, 6, or 7 at a tournament, and it's tough. And I think our Canadian players have all felt that and experienced that. And I know Bianca Andreescu has talked a lot about her mental health and how difficult it's been, and again, the expectations after winning the U.S. Open and how hard it is to continue to be at that level. And
I think people need to, not to interrupt you, but people, like, Bianca Andreescu is the only one in Canada to ever win a Grand Slam tournament.
Yeah,
like it's
in singles.
In singles.
Yeah.
Like it's that hard.
Yeah.
It's that hard. It's taken that many years for her to win the one, and not even for her to win, for Canada to win one.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big weight, right? And, Leilani Fernandez got close. Milos Raonic got close. Jeannie Bouchard got close. I'm sure Felix and Dennis would like to be close. Felix has been relatively close. Dennis has too. But it's not easy to do it. And it's, another example that you always pull out of the hat all the time is Emma Raducanu. When she won it a couple years ago, she went through qualifying. She won 10 matches, went through qualifying, didn't drop a set. And then what's Emma Raducanu done since then? Very little. And she's been injured too. And again, she's got the weight of the country on her shoulders. Now, granted, there's a lot of British tennis players on the women and men's sides that they can follow too, kind of like in Canadian tennis. But she hasn't really had any success since then.
She gets ripped in the BBC all the time.
And it's that expectation of, hey, you won the U.S. Open, and what are you gonna do next? How come you're always injured? Why are you not winning this tournament? How come you're taking so many endorsement deals? Why are you changing coaches all the time? Why are you not doing this? Why are you going to this red carpet thing? Why are you getting this sponsor? It's a constant scrutiny, and sometimes you just sit there and go, just let her play tennis and let her be a human being. And there's so much pressure that's put on athletes, and that's not just in tennis. I mean, that's in all sports, but tennis, it's kind of, it's shone a light a little bit because, the women's game especially has done a really good job promoting, good mental well-being, mental health, because, it's tough with, when you're on your own and you're traveling, and, women's tennis is predominantly centered around men all the time. I think almost 90% of the coaches on the tour in the women's game are men. You don't have those women friends or those, other women to bounce, ideas and thoughts and life things off of other than other players. And you'll find that on the tour that a lot of women on the tour who are players, they find other players who are similar to them, and then they hang out outside of tennis together because it's sort of like that's their comfort level. And, I know Petra Kvitova, Belinda Bencic, Caroline Wozniacki, Angie Kerber, Ons Jabeur, a lot of the women who are on the tour, some of them the older players on the tour, have done a really nice job of sort of integrating personal friendships around players. It's not just this standoffish, we don't talk to them, that kind of thing. Some players are very much on their own, and maybe they like it that way, but I think that's healthy for the sport and healthy for women's tennis, that you don't feel like you're on your own. Like, you can call up another player after you've had a crummy match, or go for dinner, or go for a walk somewhere. And I think the WTA has done a really good job with that, making sure that the players on the tour are in a good space. And I think that's important. And I know Bianca Andreescu, we're hoping to see her back soon. I think she's recovering still from her back injury, but we'd certainly like to see her back. And will she play at the level that she was in 2019? We'll have to see. She's had some glimpses for sure. But I think at this point, we'd just like to see her back on the court in some capacity.
Well, there's no doubt about that, because to me, Naomi Osaka comes straight to mind. Yep. Someone that, basically left the sport for a couple of years because it was just too much, I look at tennis right now, and let's end up on this here right now. You talked about the depth of the field in women and men's sports right now, in the sport of tennis right now, that there's so many that really it's getting to the point almost like some sports where the parity is incredible, and that almost anyone can win any tournament, and that includes the Masters 1000, that includes the Grand Slam tournaments. There's always the favorites. It's not always going to happen, and you're always going to have a world number one in each sport. Women's sports, no more, Serena, the kind of dominant force of the arguably the GOAT of women's tennis, Graf well before that. We could think of Sharapova no longer in the mix. On the men's side, clearly, Federer has retired. It is obvious to me, at least, with the knee, that Nadal doesn't have much left. Maybe he can play French, and that's maybe that it. He just dropped out of Indian Wells. Djokovic turns 37 in May. Are we looking at a golden age maybe of tennis in terms of young and up and comers?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly, that's something that the sport is going to need, because that's always been the concern over the last 2-3 years, was what's going to happen when Djokovic is gone? What's going to happen when predominantly Federer and Nadal, and when Serena left the women's game? How's the sport going to be? Is anyone going to be watching it? How's it going to survive? And I think now, like anything, there's you never know until it actually happens. Maybe in some ways it's kind of worked out well, because Federer is gone, but Nadal is still there, like barely he's there. Djokovic is still there. But so there's still those guys around. But now in that time, we've seen what Alcaraz has been able to do and how he's coming up the ranks. We still have a lot of good young talent. When I say young, they're not 19 anymore, but younger, like less than 25 years of age. Tsitsipas, Holger Rune. On the women's side, you see Sabalenka, Rybakina, Coco, Emma Navarro, just a good young American player who's Jessica Pegula, still playing really good tennis. Coco Gauff, as you mentioned. There are a lot of good players that are out there from all over the world. Some players we've seen, some we haven't, some we're learning about, some are climbing up the rankings, some have been up and down. So I think the game is in a good spot in terms of when the stars leave, that there's other players that are coming in to take over the reins. Iga Swiatek is clearly the number one player in the world. I think she's 23, 25, somewhere around there. You may not even be that old, but she's young. And, same with on the men's side, like Alcaraz is 20. Rune, I think, is 20. He may not even be 20. Should know my age is better. But they're good young tennis players out there, and some who we don't even know about, who are going to slowly come up the rankings. It just takes for a guy like the Italian who beat Djokovic. The guy was a lucky loser. He lost in qualifying, and he gets the main draw. He beats Djokovic in the third round. That could be just the one little springboard. He may go into oblivion after that, and you never hear from him again. That happens too. But there's a lot of good young players in both the men's and women's games out there. I think the sport will be in a good place no matter what. Obviously, for TV ratings and for the public, who are casual sports fans, you like to see the stars. You're looking for, the Coco Gauff to win the U.S. Open was great, because that's what the U.S. Open needed. That's what women's tennis needed, was an American to win the U.S. Open at that age, 19 years old. But I think, if you can get a few more stars, out there who show a little bit of, I think the personality is also a big part of it too. I think you want to see the guys and the women who show a little bit of emotion out there. You need the Kyrgios racket smashes. We've seen some good racket smashes at this tournament. Greek Spore, I don't know if you saw his match. He took a racket out smashed it 8 times, which was impressive. I gave it a 9.5 out of 10 on my ranking system. But you need that emotion. Sabalenka too, she can get emotional out there. You as opposed to the stoic, sort of boring type of player, you want that personality. And I think that's kind of the same with golf too, right? Like, you want to see the guys who are, yelling at the fans to be quiet, or, throwing a club or smashing it. You don't want to just see the guy. Yeah, no love. Yeah, right, the no love guy. But or who was the guy in the tournament in Arizona? The big crazy one.
Oh,
the Davis Cup, the Ryder Cup captain. What was his name? Zach. What's his name? Zach somebody, rather. I forgot his last name. But anyway, Zach Johnson. He went at the crowd at that. Yeah. You want those personalities. I don't want to see the guy with the buttoned up shirt right up to the neck, and just, with this, whose last name is like Charles Howell III or something. I want to see the guy who's got like a crazy name, right? And those are the personalities that I think that's what draws people into sports now, especially casual fans. They want to see the crazy outfits or the personalities. And kids today, having kids myself, they want to see sport that's fun and exciting. Like, my kids want to see, that's why they love the X Games so much, because it's crazy sports. It's high flying and action. And my boys are like, oh, when's Kyrgios playing? We want to watch Kyrgios play. Or we like watching Andy Murray because he's always yelling on the court and stuff. That's what they want. I'm not saying that's right for everybody, but that's kind of
our day.
Yeah.
To go back.
Yeah.
It's what Andre Agassi represented.
Yeah, the long hair, the jean shorts, that whole sort of look, as opposed to the all whites, country club, boring personality. So, but either way, I think the game is in a good place. I think it'll continue to do well. Do we need a few more stars that have personality? Yes. But I think in terms of the way the game is now, I mean, if you watch the Indian Wells tournament right now, Miami coming up, it's been a good start to the year. There's been some good tennis. Yannick Sinner is another great young player. Italian, hasn't lost this year. Big serve. Not a lot of personality there, but he's got a great game. So I think the game is in good hands with the players that are coming up, and I encourage anybody who's not a tennis fan to watch it and give it some time and see some of the personalities that are out there and judge for yourself if you like it or not.
Well, I would encourage the fans and the people that enjoy our lovely little Sportsline podcast to listen to your voice carefully, because when they watch the WTA or ATP highlights and they're saying, I know that voice somehow, somewhere, because that's the tough thing is that you don't, when you're a tennis commentator, they're not flashing to the booth too often.
No.
But your voice is being heard throughout the entire match.
That's a good thing for the viewers. So they can hear me, but they can't see me. That's the big thing. No, but yeah, I mean, it's fun to be able to go on TV and be on like a world feed or be on a feed that's not necessarily just here. But I never really look at it when I go on tennis. I don't go, oh, I wonder if it's being shown on TSN or if it's not. I usually know because my kids find it or tell me, and my mom, who's religiously watches and follows. She's my best supporter. It's fun to be on a network and be on TV in your home country, but also knowing that you're elsewhere as well. And I get lots of messages from people from different parts of the world saying, this was great, or this sucks, or we didn't like this, or we love that. So you know that people are watching and they find you somehow. You mention your name 2 or 3 times during a match just because that's what they want you to do. And then they go and look you up on LinkedIn, or they look you up on Twitter, and then the messages start coming in. It's like, why do you pronounce this person's name like this? Or why don't you say more of this and less of that, and all that sort of stuff. So it's fun. So I'm glad I'm in that position, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity.
Well, it's been great having the opportunity to sit here and chat tennis and your career and onward and upward, and nothing but the best, John. And it's been great knowing you and seeing you progress and mature. And as I said, I think it's always a pleasure knowing that tennis is really your first love, getting you to see that your resume has expanded so well. So congratulations and thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it, man. I love coming out to Hamilton and hanging out. And Bubs, it's been a while, so I'm glad we were able to touch base and talk about my life. I want to talk more about your life and more than mine, but this has been fun, so I appreciate it.
Appreciate it there, pal. Hey, folks, before we put today's podcast to bed, if you do have a local team to promote, believe an athlete deserves some public attention, or have an outstanding idea, or you just want to talk some sports, the Sportsline Podcast is here for you. You can contact us on one of CHCH's many social media platforms, and we'll certainly set something up. Please hit the thumbs up, share, and subscribe button. Always asking for that. For the brilliant minds that hands up produce this podcast, thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll chat tomorrow.